hottest internet access countries, and we're glad because of digital migration, we now need also a safeguard around cybercrime. There's what they call dark web, the things below what formally happens, to ensure that we've got laws that watch, for example, for cyber attacks, that watch, for example, for criminals that use the internet to either harass or try to do fraud, so that A, there is intervention in that sense, and B, there is also laws that support that intervention that comes. Those are some of the examples. And of course, we've got something like KICA Act. It's actually due now. I have read and we've been part of it. It's actually now 10 years since the KICA Act was reviewed. So we're at a stage where I am aware the previous minister actually got a committee to start making recommendations. It's now to progress that KICA Act review to ensure that sections on broadcasting, sections on telecoms, sections on the other enhanced services are reviewed to be in step with where the environment is.
I thank you, Isaboke. I want to call upon Dr. Joyce Bensouda, County MP Homa Bay, to engage you.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Stephen Isaboke.
Thank you, Honorable Bensouda.
In order to ensure, because we are being viewed by the public, and this is also an opportunity for the public to understand broadcasting and telecommunication, allow me to ask my question in two parts, very simple as introduction to my two major questions. Could you demystify your technological grounding on broadcasting and telecommunication so that we know that you understand the ministry where you're going to be the PS in case you succeed as you're praying? But B of the question, what are the archaic policies? Because I believe you have done your research and established policies which you'd want to say you will explore to improve on. Therefore, what are the policy gaps and what are you intending to bring on board? That's question number one. Number two, or do I give you time? I think I would want to chair.
I would allow you,
yeah.
Honorable Bensouda, you ask very critical questions and allow for a response before we go to the second one.
Very good.
Yes.
I agree. So I give him the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Through the chair, Honorable Bensouda, thank you. So the first section, which basically was a preamble, you asked me to demystify to what extent my exposure or knowledge of broadcasting and telecoms endear me into this position I'm being nominated to, if my understanding is correct.
Chair, allow me to repeat my question to the nominee. Could you demystify your technological grounding by giving us the difference between broadcasting and telecommunication? That gives evidence of your technological grounding, not the information that you know around that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's clear. Thank you, Honorable Bensouda, for clarifying. So broadcasting is actually a case where you've got a one-way communication using a channel. In this case, you might use a TV, you might use a radio, or a call where you actually TV or radio. Telecom is a case where you actually have a platform for two-way communication. So both are actually communication channels, and you'll see, Honorable Bensouda, that in fact there's convergence between broadcasting and telecoms. But in terms of distinction, we always say that broadcasting is one way. You actually broadcast from a point to mass. For example, you're actually broadcasting from a station in Nairobi across the country, but the people cannot reach back unless they possibly do it through the internet. In the case of telecoms, it gives a platform where you can actually do communications. You can actually go into the internet and send messages, send SMSs. So telecom is actually a two-way communication. You actually have a pack channel. So both are communication channels. One is one-way and mass, and the other is two-way and mass.
Could you kindly proceed and answer part B of the question which I asked on the archaic policies, gaps which exist, and what you intend to do?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. If successful, I will obviously cease of the position and get briefed around the current state, but my take from my own understanding, there are a couple of laws that are actually not quite updated, although we had the Constitution of Constitution of Kenya 2010. And in this space, we have, for example, acts around the KPC Act. The KPC Act is a very old act because KPC was the initial broadcaster in this country. While it was successful at the beginning, the environment has changed. It's one of the acts I will propose through the committee and the other arms of government to review so we can revitalize it and actually have a commercial and other national interests so that it actually steps up and actually is competing with other operators. So KPC Act will be one of the interventions. Number two, as I've said, the KICA Act is actually 10 years old now. It was reviewed back in 2009. It has not been reviewed for that period. 10 years for technology, Honorable Bensouda, and you are my neighbor from Homope. I notice the good work you do. Obviously, 10 years is a long time for technology. We intend to actually revisit this KICA Act and engage as required by our law and the Constitution to ensure that every provision in that KICA Act, which covers broadcasting, telecoms, courier services, and ICT innovation, is actually current, and especially current to the current population aspirations, and also obviously speaking to the plan, especially around the digital economy.
Fair trial on that. My question number two, I would like you to highlight on 4 key regulatory framework within broadcasting and telecommunication, and how you intend to ensure there is a balance between the regulations or the regulatory framework and innovation to ensure that there is a lot of economic benefit and relevance in terms of our constitution regarding telecommunication.
Thank you through the chair. So the Honorable Bensouda has asked for 4 key regulatory interventions around broadcasting and telecom that I will actually focus on. Number 1, it's around local content. There is a regulation on local content for broadcasters that in fact requires that each broadcaster carries part of their content is actually local content. We'll review and try to incentivize such that it's no longer just by law, but by practice, either by enabling affordability of local content, giving certain incentives to actually ensure that broadcasters are actually able to actually afford and actually avail the local content. In terms of telcos, I see that the sector is actually maturing and the several operators, so we shall also have some regulations around, for example, co-location of infrastructure. So you notice that if there's a new entrant, does C actually need to establish a fully established network across? The solution is actually MVNO, Chair. So you have a mobile virtual network that actually rides on your network. For example, what Airtel has done with Equitel, the Equity Bank service, such that Equity does not have transmitters, but actually rides on Airtel. It's again laws in that sector to ensure that, for example, the partnering is safeguarded and there's no exploitation. There is also laws around market dominance. I think it's also to look at consumer protection. So while Kenya is a liberal market economy, the consumers that the honorable members represent need to be protected. And just to ensure that while we allow for innovation that might lead to some operators being dominant, that in fact some of the laws address consumer protection. So ensuring that, for example, the regulators check the price points, check delivery of services to the vulnerable, or for example, the disabled, or actually the disadvantaged, that in fact they have equal access. And then there are a couple of other laws that we actually need to enact to actually ensure that we move forward. And it's something that we can actually look at, Honorable Bensouda.
Would you clarify something about licensing?
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Bensouda.
Just hold on. Clarity, Daktari. Licensing in what field? in his State Department.
In his State Department, under the regulatory framework. I mentioned 4, he has cited 3. That's what I've brought on licensing, Chair.
Pose the question. Daktari, pose the question. No.
I was just asking the nominee, I'm asking you to clarify the regulatory framework on licensing under telecommunication and broadcasting.
Thank you. I'm very clear, Chair. So the broadcasting and telecom services are actually licensed by the Communications Authority of Kenya, which is the sector regulator. There are several acts within the KICA Act that spell out licensing. There are classes of licenses that actually license broadcasters, and for broadcasting specifically, Chair, I actually want to say that the regulator merely manages spectrum and just maintains order. Otherwise, freedom of broadcasting, freedom of establishment is actually guaranteed in the Charter of Rights. So the regulator merely coordinates frequencies and order. So in terms of framework, we will review that and see, for example, new emergent technologies like, for example, the online consumption, which is actually not part of what they cover, because in this case, the guys who cover TV and radio, which is traditional, but we're seeing technology coming in, we're seeing OTT services, is actually to try to bring our licensing framework that now encompasses the new emerging broadcasting platforms, which is actually online. In terms of telecoms, there is obviously a licensing framework that allows telecom operators to bid for licenses that obviously include being awarded a national operator network license, and through that they offer voice, video, sort of mobile money and everything else. And it's just to ensure that in terms of licensing, that the regulator is open, is fair, is affording every other sort of applicant or interested party an opportunity to participate in the licensing framework, and that they actually have an equal chance to participate. Just further, just one more segment is actually the telecom, the postal services. As the honorable member and honorable members will realize, that was also liberalized. So Posta Kenya is not a monopoly for postal services. You have licensed courier services. Again, it's to look in that segment just to make sure there is no abuse of dominance, or in fact the market is a level playing field.
The last question. To what extent would you explain to the Kenyans that we have upheld as a country media freedom? We have observed in the past cases that the media have been denied their freedom. We have seen demonstrations in the past. We have seen lack of safety to some extent in some areas. We have seen their voices which have not been addressed in the past. We have seen them struggling during coverages and other things. How are you going to ensure that you uphold that media freedom is not abused, constitutional rights are also given, without with mitigating political polarization, so that there is a balance?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I'd like to respond to Honorable Bensouda to say that media freedom is actually enshrined in our Constitution. If you look at Chapter 1 under the rights, basic rights, so access to information, media freedom, and also free expression are actually guaranteed in the Constitution. Those are among the protected clauses in the Constitution. No one can touch them. And the way it was framed is that, in fact, if there's any intervention, it's actually around safeguarding national interests, security, and all that. So just from the onset, Ms. Honorable Bensouda, my approach will actually be, first of all, refer to the Constitution, refer to the law, and ensure that that law and Constitution is actually being respected by both the government agencies and the media operators. Number two, where there could be issues operational, my approach will actually be engagement, so that if they are free, they should say what they want, but there is also freedom with accountability, especially on matters that you should safeguard around our nationhood, national sort of security, peace, those sort of national ethos which are also in the Constitution. So that balance, Chair, will actually be attained, is like a bicycle, a two-wheel bicycle. They have the freedom, yes, and that cannot be touched, it's sacrosanct. But as they exercise the freedom, we call them out and say, hey, please do not infringe, just like a referee calling you out, sometimes just a verbal or sometimes a yellow card, not in an offensive way, just to call you out and say this might infringe on the existence of the nation or, in fact, national good. And in the process, with continuous engagement, the media should then be able to be engaged. And if we exercise fairness, Chair, just like a referee as we watch the Premier League, people know the referee, if he calls you, is not victimizing you, is calling you because there is something and you explain yourself. So balance is actually going to be attained by, first of all, I and the leaders will actually be leading with in this sector, understanding the law and respecting the law. Number two, ensuring that our operators who are licensed also understand the same, so we come from the same understanding. Number three, where issues come, and there does come issues from time to time. We are in a really wild Chair. These media houses are actually led by human beings. They've got their own biases or interests. We then engage. The first instance is engage. Engagement is, like stakeholder engagement, is rock bottom. Explain your concern. They explain their perspective. Eventually, you then say, this is why we actually want to intervene, or this is why we want you to self-regulate. In fact, we prefer self-regulation, so that you're restrained around what you can't do because you know the consequences. And obviously, if it exceeds, there is also, the law also provides what can be done just to ensure that they play within that freedom. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, in conclusion, which is not a question, but something for the nominee to think through, probably it might emerge because it's a sector which is part of their freedom. And when it comes to media freedom, we are not only talking of expression of speech or what they are broadcasting or through telecommunication. There is serious challenge of salary or their remuneration. And that is part of their right. They don't need to go on street demanding for payment, demanding for promotion, an area which is part of the media or broadcasters' right. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Honorable Bensouda, I'll ask you, would you want to put it to the nominee, or would you want to pose it as a question?
Thank you, Chair. The nominee should be in a position, because he's also Kenyan, assuming that it goes right for you to own this office. We are having the media that is on the street demonstrating, asking for their salaries. I was one time confronted by them as a parliamentarian and legislator to explain to them what we are also doing. I'm throwing that back question to you. What are you going to do to ensure that the broadcasters are not on street demanding for their pay and ensuring that there is a balance? We have public and private broadcasters. What action are you going to do? And this particularly with KBC. I visit KBC, which appears to be a dilapidated institution. I'm a non-motivated person who wants to air even government policies and issues that are touching on Kenyans. What are you going to do to ensure that their remuneration, we no longer see them on street? Thank you.
Thank you, through Chair. I would like to state with humility that media are actually Kenyans. Media are our brothers and sisters. They have families. They have obligations. They also have a right to exist. So in terms of approach to the issues that the Honorable Bensouda has actually enumerated around the current friction, where some media are actually lacking salaries, and salaries are a basic thing for an employee. In fact, they're on the streets. She affirms that some of them have Contera. She's very well known. You cannot miss her on the street. I'm not surprised for the good Honorable Bensouda. And in fact, that KPC facilities are actually dilapidated, meaning they're actually run down and in bad shape. I would like to respond by saying that if approved, and I actually take on the honor to lead this function, the first thing I'll do, Honorable Chair, is actually go to the basics. Where did the rain start beating us? It was never usual that in an entity in Kenya that, in fact, you work for a month. We used to hear about it, else we are not here. Where did the rain start beating us? Number two, to say, if there are pending bills where these media houses have worked, they're due to be paid, and they're legitimate and confirmed, and that obviously is something that I will be subject to guidance from the structures as I'll find. We will ensure that we lobby the relevant entities within government, with its treasury, all in fact support from the highest level, to ensure that we release those pending bills. Then the cash goes in circulation to the media houses, and the media houses are able to meet their basic obligation. So to also ensure that in terms of activities, that in fact we are fair in terms of how we activate if there are any commercial engagements out there. In terms of specific KPC, Honorable Chair, I will actually, again, re-engage back in the turnaround plan, look at our assets, look at our liabilities, and say, because the exchequer is constrained, Treasury can no longer afford to give all the funds that the state enterprises require. Is there another thing we can do with own-generated funds? And this is why I said this respected senior man, old man, should actually look at these assets, lease, let, use for some partnership of sorts, and start utilizing that to actually ensure they have a live stream. So, in other words, KPC getting their own generated income, which of course will impress upon the board and management to ensure that becomes reality and the people are actually paid salaries. So I concur with you, Honorable Bensouda. It's not human for people to actually not be paid. It's not human for people to be protesting, to be given their basic right. I think it's a thing that I'll seize as a leader and as a very humane person, just to ensure our people are secured.
Thank you, Honorable Bensouda. Allow me, committee members and the nominee, to cede the floor to the Vice Chair. Vice Chair, kindly engage the nominee.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. There's one thing I want to remind you. For you being nominated, for you to be in this platform, I want to ask you, I want you to be specific. I'm not a man who needs a lot of stories. My question is one-on-one. For example, I want to be the best ones. Do you understand this committee? What's the name of this committee?
It's actually the Committee on Communications. The Committee on...
Committee on Communications,
Yes.
You do more research on it. Do you understand the role of this committee towards the department you're being nominated to?
Through the Honorable Chair once again, and my understanding of the role of the committee is actually embedded in the Constitution. The way government works is that the government, through the executive, will run ministries. My function as PS will actually then engage with this committee in terms of my programs, my proposals, my policies, including budget planning. We'll then engage with you to support us so that that is actually taken on into the bigger plan. And eventually, I'm then able to fulfill the mandate of the department and my sagas that are under me. So the committee is actually my approver, it's actually my boss. I will then have to engage with the chair and the committee to ensure that we are securing anything that we need on our side. Then we take it to the national level.
Remember, any regulations concerning your department must pass through this committee.
That's correct.
Now, the second one. Do you understand your structures in the docket of telecommunication and broadcasting?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have obviously knowledge from my own sort of observation that, in fact, the structure entails, my department structure entails broadcasting and telecoms. So in that, I have an administrative director. Then I have a director in charge of communications, national communications. I've got a director in charge of telecoms and postal services. And as I said earlier, there is also a directorate of National Communications Secretariat. There's like a think tank that cuts across. Below that, you then have different functions that feed into these directorates that feed into my office.
Perfect.
If approved.
Do you understand the sagas in this department?
Through the chair, I just ask that you repeat again.
I'm asking.
The sagas, these are semi-autonomous
Yes.
government agencies within your department.
Yes, I do.
Can you mention them?
The sagas under this department are actually Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, the Communications Authority of Kenya, the Postal Corporation of Kenya, the Kenya Institute of Mass Communication, and other subsidiary ones like the National Communications Secretariat.
We also have Media Council of Kenya.
Media Council as well, yeah.
Good.
Which you had mentioned earlier.
Which I mentioned, yeah.
It's one of the sagas, said me.
Yeah.
Now, the key question now, the reason I'm asking you that, your outgoing predecessor, the former now, Professor Kisangani, were you aware that at the end of his tail end, started an habit of ganging the media houses and commanding and using the powers within his office by directing that these media houses never broadcast using government agencies? Now I'm asking you, you are giving us very good explanations, but once, if God will allow you to be now in the office, are you not going to use the same powers and gang these media officers, every media stations, that they should sing to your song? Which is your song? Remember, you are appointed to be in this position by somebody else, who's the president. What if the president is not happy with a specific media station? Are you going to sing to the boss or sing as per the law?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honorable Miruka. He's actually a neighbor from home. So I'd like to respond.
This is a tough neighbor. This is.
I'll actually respond to this question.
He's basically asking you to be jirani mwema.
Thank you, Chair. I'm protected. Regarding this question, I will not specifically be able to comment. It will not be fair for me to comment about my predecessor personally, but I just want to comment in a generic sense to say the media freedom, as said earlier, and as established in the law, is actually embedded in the Constitution under the Charter of Rights. Freedom of expression, freedom of media, freedom of access to information are all embedded. You cannot change them unless you get 3/4 via a referendum. So it's embedded. Number two, with that understanding, referring to the law, because in these public offices, through the chair, you have to be guided by the law, not your own sentiments or whims. Guided by the law, I will ensure that I humbly follow the conventions of the law. If there are instances where, for example, there's been tension or misunderstanding between media and other establishments, state or otherwise, I think the first intervention, Chair, is actually engagement. So gagging is not a modern tactic. Even in your own house, and I'm sure some of you have Gen Zs or younger, Gen Zs, you cannot gag even your own children. They will protest back and say, Daddy, no. In this case, as a regulator or as part of the regulatory ecosystem, I will promote the approach of engagement. And I am sure my colleagues, and we did a lot of engagement, even digital migration, my colleagues will be alive to call someone and say, hey, there's an issue here, can we meet over coffee and understand what's going on? And then from there, have interventions where they either self-regulate or you alert them about the consequences. So engagement and public participation.
I like that, and I wish you make it practical if you are less. We were successfully nominated to this position. Now the last one, which is very interesting. We have two types of leaders. Remember, you are going to be the accounting officer in this ministry, meaning you have some powers and privileges within your docket. Are you going to be a man who wants to take it all? That the sectors you have told me that are under you, they should come to your office for them to operate, or you are going to be somebody who give them freedom to operate, do the right thing, and then be answerable to you?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, my style of leadership, obviously, in this context, again, will be guided by the law. So the position of Principal Secretary as established as defined roles and responsibilities in the Constitution and under the Public Service Act, that will be my guiding principle in terms of the official engagements. Number two, in terms of the conduct that the Honorable Alpha Miruka mentions, my style of leadership will actually be more to do with empowering. So ensure that everyone is aware of their roles and responsibilities, ensure the roles each one of them is contributing, ensure each one of them is actually pulling or playing their role to deliver the services to the public. My analogy, Honorable Chair, is like a football club. So each one, from the goalkeeper to the forward, are all playing their role. So enable and empower. Obviously, with a caution that they must play within the law, they must play within the rules, and there's consequences. If, for example, they go outside it, and when they need approval, they seek approval at the next levels, even if it's mine. Thank you.
Good. Me, I needed just one answer, strike, no explanation. The last one. Which approach are you going to use? Remember, this country is trained in terms of exchequer system, from getting government to fund the government operations. Which approach are you going to use for partnership investors towards your department? The approach is very important. You have mentioned about the leasing of KBC assets. These KBC assets, remember, these are just a hot cake for grappers. You're going to face a lot of resistance. How are you going to make this thing happen for A in KBC to improve, for the KBC to revive and become live in this nation? And how are you going to do the approach of PPP and other investors in the ministry?
Thank you, through the chair. The PPP Act actually spells out how public enterprises can engage private sector collaborators or partners to deliver certain mandates and actually to raise own generated revenue. That will be the guiding principle in terms of the framework for KBC or any other entity to actually approach potential private sector partners. So the guiding principle is the PPP Act, which is actually also enacted and actually existing. Number two is for KBC to have a plan, because if you approach any private sector operator, you need to have a plan that is actually commercially viable, that's attractive, that is also rewarding and sustainable. Once you come with that, you then float it out according to the public sort of a PPP Act and also the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. Because if you're going out, you need to be careful that you're not, for example, single sourcing. Number three is just to ensure that whichever partners, obviously going through the normal appeal to get, whichever partners you get have the capacity and they're actually compatible and they comply with the law as your partner. And then in the process, you raise resources.
Remember, that's the most sensitive part of it. Remember, you have said here you are a shareholder in GoTV. How are you going to maneuver now in that approach and reduce the conflict of interest?
Through the chair, my neighbor is visiting a question that I thought I'd actually closed completely and dead and buried. So my answer through the chair again is that I am actually conscious of that potential conflict. It's not manifested yet. As a first step, as I said, I have now stepped down as a director. Number two, if approved and successful, I intend to review my position as a shareholder subsequently. And I will be declaring wherever any conflict comes and recusing myself from being involved in any of those things.
I thank you, Vice Chair. I want to offer this opportunity to the Honourable Member for KU South. For Kuresoi South, sorry. KU South, you'll come later. Just acclimatize and catch up.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Isaboke, what strategies will you put in place to promote local content creation while balancing freedom of expression and national cohesion?
Very important.
Can I ask the next? Or he deals with
because that
one?
was direct. You can ask both of them. He'll answer thematically.
Mr. Isaboke, I have the second one.
Yes.
The Universal Service Fund, USF, aims to bridge the digital divide, but has faced criticism over transparency in allocation. How will you enhance equity and transparency in expanding connectivity to underserved areas, and specifically allocation for rural broadband infrastructure? Thank you, Chair.
Two very critical questions. Write down your alley in the State Department of Broadcasting and Communication. Mr. Isaboke.
Thank you. Through the chair, the Honourable Member of Parliament for Kuresoi has asked two questions, and I'll take them in that order. In terms of local content, that's actually a very fundamental question, because what has happened with the digitizing, which is actually very much part of the current government, is sort of a plan around digital economy. We have a lot of capacity. It's like having many highways, because digital has opened the airwaves completely. So in order to incentivize and ensure that our youth, we in fact are the biggest challenge the president and the country is dealing with, we will put regulations and other incentives that actually enable the youth to actually access local content. I, for example, am aware that in fact there is an active rollout of digital hubs in all the 1,450 wards in the country. So a digital hub is basically a hotspot where internet has been enabled. You literally get there, get a password, you can get in. So you literally can record, for example, a TikTok and post it online and start getting views. And we know that people commercialize all those digital platforms and actually earn revenue. So it will actually be honorable to promote access of our digital platforms through, for example, the plan, which talks about digital access in the last mile, and ensuring that the youth and people in the rural areas have access of internet and other services as good as we, the privileged in Nairobi. And through that, they will actually have a lot, Mheshimiwa, user-generated content. If as many of us generate the stuff and put it out, some of it becomes commercially viable, some of it becomes communication. So in terms of national cohesion, is again the message I said around train the youth to be nationalist. Train users of channels to actually, wherever they're communicating, to think about country, not sectional, not local. And in the process, when they'll be recording and distributing anything, for example, what we see in WhatsApp, TikTok, and all that, they're talking about fashion, entertainment, sport, achievements, maybe very successful agriculture, other than anything that is actually negative, like bigotry and hatred. Those will be some of the things that we'll actually use in terms of regulation. The honourable member raises the question around USF and actually says that there has been a question around transparency in terms of its allocation of funds, especially covering underserved areas, to address specifically the broadband infrastructure. That's a very apt question for this moment, because in fact the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, which is actually part now of the bigger broad-based approach, is actually digital economy. And there's no way you can have a digital economy without digital infrastructure to the deepest rural areas, literally the deepest local markets. So, like I said earlier, the USF was actually established to ensure that use the funds from operators. All these telcos and customers fee, tax of sorts, they get money. That money should be used for where commercial have not actually accessed. Is that there could be either they've been disadvantaged or actually not covered at all. My role as PS, if approved, will actually be to seize particularly the details around those non-covered areas. And that's why my engagement will actually be encouraging a two-way engagement between the committee and myself and my officers. Once we know those, USSAF is under the CA board. We'll then engage through the CA board and the USF advisory board to ensure that they address those. After all, they've actually been put in place and those funds are actually there to serve Kenyans. So we'll actually ensure that mandate is fulfilled in an equitable and sustainable way. Thank you, Chair.
Are you satisfied? I want to give this opportunity. Engineer, you'll hold your horses because we've really leaned on the side of broadcast. I want to go into telecommunications a bit. Allow me to cede the floor to the County MP Baringo to pose some questions around telecommunication.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And our nominee, 22 and 23. My question is, the Competition Act's Cap 204 provide that a firm in any industry that has a market share of above 50% in dominant and should be so declared and treated as such. The market share of one telecom operator in Kenya is estimated to be above 60%. Some of the agencies that should protect consumers from such abuses have been hesitant to declare this dominance. How will you deal with this issue? That is one. I don't know whether you would answer that and then we go next.
I'm guided by the chair.
Okay.
They are very, I would imagine that you're still in that space of telecommunications, so
yes,
you can ask both of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. There has been resistance also of a push to have telecommunication operators split their businesses so that mobile telephone services are regulated by the Communication Authority of Kenya, while the monies related services, which is financial services, are regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya. What is your view in this, on this split? Thank you, Chair. I think I will take that.
Thank you, Honorable Jamatia, because those are critical questions.
Yes.
Question number one has to do with dominance in the telecommunication industry. And the way the Honorable Member for Baringo posed it is that we have regulatory bodies that should be superintending over the situation of dominance. And they have been hesitant to even declare some clearly dominant players to be dominant in the sector. Secondly, the Honorable County MP is very keen to know about the issue of a dominant player having all their entities operating from under one roof. Honorable Jematia, I thank you for that question.
Yes, I will add something after that, but I want to listen to what the nominee is giving us on this matter.
So in terms of money-related services, if I hear the Honorable Jematia right, what should fall under your purview and what should fall under the purview of CBK when it comes to regulating fintech? The fintech services, yes.
Thank you, Honorable Jamatia. Through the chair, I would like to address the first question the Honorable Member asked about potential operator that in fact might be holding share above 60%. And as she states, some state agencies...
In fact, the law stipulates
correct
that anyone, even a point above 50%, is already dominant. So it's not even 60. What she said is that some operators are even going beyond 60%. But the law stipulates that anything above 50% should be deemed dominant and declared such.
I'm guided, Chair. So I'd like to respond to that question by saying that, in fact, just tracing back, and I'll make just a short sentence. Going back to KICA 209, competition is a section in the KICA Act, and it was actually one of the sections where we had a very contested submission with the other operators from telcos and ourselves as broadcasters, because sometimes we're being fingered as being dominant. In the course of regulation where the regulators actually took a lot of time, that section was taken, revisited again, reviewed again. Then a debate ensued, and this is where the answer to my honorable comes in, that in fact, Kenya is a free market economy. So there is no problem with dominance. Dominance per se is not a problem. It's a piece of dominance. It's a piece of dominance. So the premise was that if you innovate, and you're the first to implement a certain project or program, you will then run ahead because you're first in mind, you're the one that consumers adopt, and you run ahead of every other operator. So we do not want to punish you, and that point came out, don't punish success that is coming out of innovation. What you should check is a piece of dominance. In this case, for example, for the telco that the honorable member speaks about, let's look at consumer protection. Let's look at pricing, predatory pricing, if they're doing anything. And the Communications Authority has got a competition department that looks after those parameters. They do research. If an operator is found, for example, to be violating appeasing price and all that, then interventions are done. And just one example, traditionally, the interoperability rates were actually skewed towards one operator. We are aware that those have subsequently been reviewed. And in fact, the other operators are actually now able to fairly compete between inter-network calls, just as an example. So really, it's addressing a abuse of dominance, and that's an ongoing function of the Communications Authority. In terms of the second question, through you, Chair, which raises the question about mobile telcos are also a financial services provider through the sort of mobile money transfers. And the Honourable Member asks, what do we then do? I mean, between the sector regulator, which is broadcasting and telecoms, and the central bank, which is actually regulating financial services. Again, this is a sort of an occurrence from history where the telcos actually innovated and came up with the mobile transfer. As members will know, the mobile transfer by one of the leading operators was actually one of the pioneer ones globally. So they then innovated. And in fact, at the point of mobile innovation, there was no regulation. So what do we then do? I think it's a cross-sectoral issue. It will take both the central bank, who regulates financial services, and broadcasting regulator, and the telecoms regulator, to then engage and say, how do we deal with this mongrel that is operating from both telecoms and the financial services, and to ensure that they actually operate within, the law, and in fact serve the public. The biggest interest here is public service that is sustainable. I'll say the best approach will actually be engage with the central bank, and of course engage with those operators to see if there's need to review any of those structures, because it's cross-cutting.
What would you say to those who would advise this committee to adopt a wait-and-see attitude before intervening on the matters that have been brought forth by the county MP for Baringo? There are those who tell us that if you rush to regulate, you will be suppressing innovation. There are those who say to this committee that if you do not, then you're not doing the job that you're supposed to be doing, presiding over the sector. How do you play the balance between rushing to regulate and allowing for the market to mature to a place where it self-regulates?
So, through the chair again, this is a case where maybe operators are actually coming for arbitration or for determination or direction because they stand at different positions. In this case, you've got a section that favor wait and see, as you say, or you've got another section of interested parties that are actually interested in intervention. That obviously then becomes an issue of interest, public interest, and our constitution, and in fact the way we operate even as a sector, entails sector consultations, sector engagements, and if possible, public participation. So we, first of all, will have to listen to each side that is representing their views, both those who are actually saying let the operators are without any infringement or sort of inhibition, and those saying that there should actually be some overreach. Once we do that, we then sit back collectively as this committee and the sector operators to actually find where is the best interest of Kenyans served. Are they actually being served properly as is, or what adjustments do we need to ensure that the operators are actually fulfilling the Kenyan services? And to your point, just to close, Chair, innovation is a very open-ended thing. So we have to be careful that in the process of trying to overreach and regulate, that we actually do not inhibit ideas, new ideas coming, progressive things coming. M-Pesa will never have been pathed, and I now mentioned it by brand, if it was never let to run ahead of regulation. It's very common sometimes for innovation to run ahead of regulation, and we call it, you can spill a bit of blood. Then eventually you now regularize. You now get the regulation catching up, and you engage and set the laws. Thank you.
Stephen, are you conversant with the idea of sandboxing? And what is your understanding of sandboxing as a concept even utilized in a space of innovation?
So not quite, Chair, in detail, but in terms of the innovation, obviously, there's a whole process that ideas come from incubation to the market. So that specific term, I cannot comment on it specifically, but I do know that ideas, and in this case, for example, we have innovation hubs for ICT in Kenya, then you actually check for viability and technical, sort of compatibility. You then make tests, eventually test for sort of commercial viability, eventually commercialize.
The Honorable Engineer Mark Nyamita.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, allow me to ask that, I don't know whether the nominee, we are bombarding you with too many questions. You want to take a small break or you are still okay? Because we don't want you to feel really harassed because it's been quite one after another. I propose, Chair, that maybe you give him a bit of a break, lest he faints here before. But if you're okay to continue, we can go on.
Through the Chair, I'm guided, but if also, because we are all human beings, if also members need a comfort break, need to break eyes as we continue. It will not be me alone. Also, the Honorable neighbor, the Honorable Mark Nyamita, who is actually from my neighborhood, is making a natural, very good nature suggestion. So I plead maybe a 2 minutes nature break for all of us, not myself. And we carry on.
We will appreciate that, if not anything. We have before us a very witty communicator. So, members, it is upon yourselves. This is your committee, and the time being 7 minutes past midday, I would allow for a 5-minute break, if you would allow, so that we convene here at 1:15. So kindly, members.
Okay. Thank you.
Engineer Nyamita. And even as we do this, members, remember what our standing orders stipulate in regard to our engagements with our invited guests. Thank you.